Hello YouTube friends and subscribers. We're looking at the Volkswagen Golf Mk5, and what I noticed was just rolling to a stop at the traffic lights, the car seemed to be just sort of snatching a little bit at the last moment on the roll up to the line, and that's usually a sign that one of the brakes is possibly binding. So what I'm doing is selecting one of these rear wheels, which is seems like the most likely culprit. Right, well, we've got the jack under there, and using the bright fluorescent magenta colour blanket to kneel on. Obviously other colours are available and just as useful. Now, you see what we've got here? So that is binding. Now my guess is that the brake cylinder's probably seized up, or at least heading in that direction. So I think we're going to have to take the wheel off and see what exactly is the problem. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, guys. Why hasn't he got the little spouty bit in the end of his WD-40? Well, you know how it is, that always gets lost. Right, so we'll leave that to soak in. Okay, we're using the 13 mil ring spanner on there, and on the bottom one as well. Just to get them started. Now you'll find that the other nut there will start spinning when you do this, so you need a 15 mil on that nut there. It's like a back nut, I suppose. You make sure you're using 15. That's on. Then you can just remove that short stubby bolt. I'll just do this. So there's a 15 and a 13 used for that job. Now that will come out of there if I had both hands to spare. You can see it's just finger tight now. Do the same at the bottom here. Right, we've hooked that up in a rough way using a piece of old coat hanger wire. In my experience as a DIYer, there is no way to get that piston to go back into its chamber without using a rewind tool. I've got this one, I think it was about £20, and honestly you only have to use it once and you feel like it was worth the money. So a real worthwhile investment, to be quite honest guys, a rewind tool. Having said that, I haven't used it for a long time, and probably have to do the learning curve all over again, but anyway, that's what we're going to use. Right, now as far as I remember, this comes in 3 parts. You've got the winder, you have this sort of back plate thing, and you have this disc with the 2 notches. Now from memory, the notches go into the slots in the end of the piston, and you let's have a look. Maybe you put this on first, so that then goes in the end of the piston like that, in those notches, and this thing here goes in that little sort of rebate in the tool. Wind it back if necessary. Right, I think that's all in place now. Doing it live guys, so if it all goes wrong, well that's just hard luck. I know it is a cow of a job and you have to put a fair bit of pressure on. Yeah, that is pretty solid. I'm going to have to move the camera out the way a little for a little moment while I get some real pressure on that. What I'm going to do now is open the brake fluid cap so that when we push the piston back in and the fluid pushes back down the lines, it won't overflow this brake fluid thing, or at least it'll make space for the fluid to backflow into that chamber. If your car's quite old like mine, you'll find this will be as stiff as hell. So I'm going to use an extension bar on the little handle there and just get hold of the bottom of the caliper with these grips, and then just see if we can get enough pressure on here. Oh shit. I can just see it moving a little bit, so that's quite promising. Oh jeez. That is stiff as hell, but it did move. Okay. Right, this is the DIY version of how to do this, guys. As you see, we're not rehearsing it. We haven't done this in a studio. This is for real. I don't mind telling you guys, that's me flat out there. It is going back, but very hard work. And you could argue that if it's that stiff, the thing should be taken to pieces and cleaned out or completely replaced. You can see that's gone most of the way in now.
The reason I'm using a piece of pink towel there is to stop the caliper banging around and damaging that rubber seal. If you've got a different colour piece of towel, that's perfectly acceptable and should just do the job equally as well. Right, I've cleaned that surface up the best I can with this very worn out brass wire brush to get that clean, and just clean everything else, both these surfaces as well. I'm going to clean everything as hard as I can without damaging the rubber seal. Then we'll see if we can put this back together. In reality, guys, that is very stiff and it probably should be all disassembled and remade, etc, etc, but we're going to just be a bit lazy today. You can see there's quite a bit of wear left on these pads, which is kind of another signal that it's not so much the pads that are at fault, it's to do with the caliper or the piston in the caliper. I've cleaned these areas here all up as much as I can, and these little shoulders where the pads sit, got that as clean as I can as well. Really, guys, you're looking at a piece of equipment that's 15 years old and has done the thick end of 200,000 miles. I think it's entitled to look a little bit tired, but when I actually tried to see if I could get a whole new caliper at those good prices that I mentioned earlier, not available. So you're talking of 70 or 80 pounds to replace the caliper. It's a question really, with 200,000 miles on the clock, whether the car gives out first or I do. So I'm afraid we're going to put it back together now the best we can and hope the old girl keeps going for a few more miles. We've obtained some very modestly priced brake pads from GSF. They have a, I don't know whether this is an anti-squeal thing on the back here. It doesn't say anything about tearing it off like you do with some brake pads. There are some instructions in the box, so I guess we could have a look at that. Perhaps I need to zoom back a bit for you there. Now, anybody who wants to read this in a different language, be my guest. And you're also going to need a magnifying glass. Got some stuff called copper ease, and it says on there anti-seize assembly compound. So I've just put a little bit on the shoulders of the pads, on the area that's going to come into friction with those little shoulders there. Obviously you don't want to get anything on the face of the pad or on the disc. So we're just going to place that on there now, like that. I don't know if you can see that okay. And the one that goes at the back, that one goes on there, and then with a bit of luck, I can hear my phone going now. Now we get to the interesting bit now, where we want to put the caliper back on onto its mountings. Right, what we're going to do is put a little bit of that copper ease on this caliper, on this piston, just to help it lubricate it a little bit. Of course, if you haven't, oh that's right, just these pins are sprung loaded, so you need to squeeze those in. And of course, if you haven't wound the piston back in far enough, everything's going to be tight as hell. Now, I think that's lined up, but as you can see, that's a bit tight. But my guess is that I think we'll get over that. Now, I managed to find a couple of fresh bolts, which I think are probably a good idea. Don't quite know what they came from, but they were lying around. Let's get this back in here. Round about there. Bottom one. Round about there. So we do this stuff back up with the 15 and the 13. So get the bolts all the way back in. There is supposed to be a torque setting, but once you've got it as tight as it'll go, there's not much argument really in my book. That little bit of that will soon take up when you use the brakes a couple of times. What I am going to do now is go back and check the brake fluid level and then tighten the top down under the bonnet on the brake fluid reservoir. You can see that the brake fluid is now sort of backfilled into the reservoir, because when we push the brake piston in on that back brake, it's actually forced the fluid back into this reservoir. Thanks for watching everyone. Amateur hour here at DIY headquarters, where we have replaced the brake pads on an ancient Mark V Volkswagen Golf Tdi, just coming up to 200,000 miles now. You could say, well, was it worth it? Well, the entire caliper would have been about £80, I think. The disc, you could see, was pretty well shot, but you know, did we want to spend £120 on this car? Probably not. I think we'll get away with what we've done today. So thanks for watching. If you would like to subscribe to my channel, thank you, that'd be good. You'll be able to see what else we get up to as we fix our car, do a few building jobs, and even some photography work. Bye for now.